Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk a little bit more about the Matthew Mercer effect on Dungeons and Dragons. Specifically, I've been watching Ginny D, and she's very interesting in that she talks a lot about Critical Role, right? So she did a whole bunch of content about Critical Role, and totally says she's a Critical Role stan. Nothing wrong with that. But I'm really thinking about Dungeons and Dragons right now from the perspective of what's happening with Dungeons and Dragons overall, right? And I'm a little alarmed. The reality is, there's just the pandemic is rough right now. I know D&D has been doing well, but this whole possibility of that ICV2 brought to light about the possibility of a sale of Dungeons & Dragons, it just really has me shook a little bit. And I've been thinking a lot about, well, if D&D is going to get sold, right, where would the people who would buy it, and by the way, it's still a possibility, hasn't been confirmed, anything like that, right? But, somebody looking outside in, they would say, who are the most important people in Dungeons & Dragons right now? And honestly, another reason why I'm really worried overall for the future of the game is the exodus of Kate Welch, right? That, she was supposed to be the chosen one, right? Like, she was perfectly primed to be the first female design lead for Dungeons & Dragons. And I think, they brought her in, they had her working on books so that when she had taken over, there would have been a reason why she would have been hand trained, by the last design lead. Now it's just going to be rough. It's going to be a really rough transition, right? So so when I think any of these large corporations, any $1 billion buyer, and I really think the value on Dungeons & Dragons is $4 billion. Any $1 billion buyer they're going to do their due diligence. They're going to look at the property, right? And if you look at the property, you are going to find Mercer, right? And the reality is, Mercer's shadow over the game is 10 times greater than Mike Merle's. Who knows Mike Merle's? Who, right? But who doesn't know Matt Mercer, right? He's just a bigger name attached to D&D than is currently attached, even by the design lead, right? When you hear, D&D 5e, who's attached to it outside of our community, just regular muggles, Mercer is it, right? He really owns 5e, right? And to the point where, like, I was watching Ginny D, and I was like, is she a Dungeons and Dragons fan, or is she a Critical Role fan, right? And of course, Critical Role plays Dungeons and Dragons, but I think I'm in a similar vein, right? Where, like, the movie American History X, right? The movie Kingdom of Heaven, the Incredible Hulk movie, right? The Italian Job. I'm not so hot about any of those movies, but I'm a huge Ed Norton fan, right? He's my favorite actor. He's absolutely fantastic. I really, really have incredibly enjoyed his career, right? And I'm an Edward Norton fan way more than I'm like an Italian Job fan, right? Like, so like that, and I'm curious, like, I'm really curious about Critters. Like, are they D&D fans or are they Critical Role fans? And is that an important distinction, right? Because, and especially because the bar is so high on a Matt Mercer game, right? So, I really think when buyers come for Dungeons & Dragons, I do think ICV was right. ICV2 was right. I think that, that Dungeons & Dragons is being positioned by Hasbro Games to be sold, right? For Wizards of the Coast would be sold, right? I think the evidence they laid down is very compelling, and I think it is correct, right? So with that said, Matt Mercer is the penultimate. He is the ultimate celebrity connected to Dungeons and Dragons, and so even as the vector Dungeons and Dragons is being positioned, is in my opinion, being positioned, right? Because I agree with what ICV2 put forward. The Matthew Mercer effect, it's not just what players are expecting at your table. It's really going to be what, billionaire interests are seeing when they look at the property, right? Because, here's a perfect example, right? Amazon is working on a Critical Role show, right? What Dungeons and Dragons show is coming out? That is, Critical Role is going to have an animated television show. Dungeons and Dragons hasn't had an animated television show since 1994. I think it was between 92 and 94, right? So Matthew Mercer was able to do in 5 years what Dungeons and Dragons hasn't been able to do in 3 decades, right? Incredible, absolutely incredible, right? So I think the Matthew Mercer effect just cannot be understated. It is massive. It is just absolutely massive, and and we really you can't count Mercer out. He's involved, I think, at every level. He impacts the expectation of your players. He impacts what DMs think they need to do at the table, and I think he's even going to impact significantly the sale of Dungeons and Dragons when it happens. Right? Really, really huge. It's just mammoth, right? And also, with that said, I also think when it comes to that design lead position, it's Mercer's for the taking if he wants it, right? So, there's just no two ways about that. Also, I'm a huge fan of Mike Mearls, but I think he may be on a timer. I really do, for a whole host of reasons. Now, take all of this in stride. We don't want to live in fear, but I'm a little alarmed. I really am. That ICV2 article really has me shook, and I'm just kind of talking through this in my head. Thanks for going on that journey with me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.